If you put this on to fall asleep, do not. Slow your breathing if you want, dim the room if you must, but keep your eyes open. I am going to hand you 3 true stories that slide under locked doors and sit on your chest the moment you drift. They begin softly, with routine and ritual, and they end in the kind of silence that makes you stare at light switches. You will hear a radio crackle when no one is speaking, a footstep where there should be only humming fluorescent drawl, a voice that knows your name from behind a door that should not exist. 3 places. 3 people. 1 long night that keeps looping back to you. I work nights as a security officer at a small regional hospital, the kind that looks safe because the floors are glossy and the volunteers wear vests. My job is rounds, doors, cameras, quiet. The quiet is a trick. If you sit in it long enough, you hear what the building is really saying. That January, we were short-staffed, so I covered the sublevel corridor that connects radiology to the old psych wing we closed 15 years ago. The brass plate on the fire door still said Ward C, though nobody had a key that fitted. I checked it at 2:07 a.m. The door was latched. The camera above it showed a rectangle of dead hallway and a single exit sign pulsing every few seconds, like a red heartbeat. At 2:19 I heard the call button in room 212 chimp, the tiny ping they make when a patient rolls on it. Only we had no patient in 212. The floor was shut for waxing. I radioed housekeeping and got no answer. I walked the service stairs and came out by the dim vending alcove facing Ward C. The fire door looked the same. Still, the air felt breathed in. A cold, sweet smell, like damp paper and sleep, slipped past me. The call button pinged again, 3 short notes from a room that did not exist anymore on the census. I pulled the keyring from my belt, even though there was no point, and the radio on my shoulder coughed with a voice I knew very well. It was my supervisor, but wrong. The cadence was his, the pauses were his, the way he said my name flat and practical, never a question. The words were not his. He told me to open Ward C and bring the wheelchair from the corner of the hall because a woman had fallen between the beds. He told me not to look at her head. He told me I was doing fine. My thumb found the talk button and I said the only thing that came to mind, that the ward was sealed and we did not keep chairs back there. Static swarmed the channel, parted, and the voice stepped through again, close enough that I felt the breath in my ear. He said my full name. Then, like a tired teacher, he said, "Come on. I can see you." Something small scuffed on the other side of the fire door. Not a foot. Like something being dragged lightly, like a strap across tile. The exit sign blinked and stayed dark a blink too long. I took 1 step back and the camera feed above the door popped to life on my phone, cycling through the sublevel angles. For 2 frames, I saw myself standing in the vending alcove and something else standing just behind me at shoulder height, like a person wearing a patient gown facing the back of my head. No face, no hair, only a pale shine like paper in water. The feed glitched and corrected, and I was alone again. The call button chimed. The radio said my name like a lullaby, and then another voice cut across, real and frustrated, my supervisor demanding to know where the hell I was. I ran. I did not wait to see what would push through Ward C. On the stairs my radio blared garble that sounded like a chorus of breath moving in the same direction. When I reached the main desk, my supervisor was already calling my phone. I told him what I thought I saw and he told me to meet him on sublevel 1 together. We went. The vending alcove was just a nook with humming machines. The fire door showed no camera above it at all. The plate that once said Ward C was gone. Only 4 empty holes in the paint held a rectangle of cleaner white where it used to be. I told myself I had mixed up corridors. I told myself exhaustion is a magic trick. At 3:08 a.m., room 212 chimed again. Out past the hospital glare, the woods keep their own hours. A ranger who sent this to me said he never believed in the phrase haunted trail until the night he followed a lantern through fog on a closed switchback. The park had been evacuated for a storm, and he was sweeping the last loop with a partner when the radios died. The fog came in like wool stuffed into a throat. A warm glow hovered 2 bends ahead, moving as if a person carried it, old-fashioned, not a headlamp, but something with a handle and a flame. He shouted that the park was closed. The globe paused and bobbed, like acknowledgement, and then slipped downslope off any map, between black firs, into an arroyo where there is no trail at all. They cut the light and listened. Way below them, where the ravine spills out into boulder fields, a second lantern answered, and then a third, one higher up on their flank, as if the hill had been quietly peopled while the fog was thickening. The partner came on the radio, faint, saying, "I can see your light." He was behind them, with no lantern burning. His voice shouldn't have been on my left, but it was, thin through the fog like a radio trapped under a blanket. We spun in place, scanning for a beam that wasn't there while the lantern below us bobbed twice and slid farther downslope, as if whoever held it wanted us to follow. My partner squeezed my arm hard enough to hurt, and said my name without the radio. I smelled kerosene without wind. The forest took our breath and gave back nothing. We clipped into the same safety line, a 5-meter cord we carry for slope checks, and marked our boot prints with flagging tape as we edged down. The glow stayed just in view, warm, alive, and always 2 turns away. At the arroyo lip there was a sound like a chain brushing rock. The light waited. The radio on my chest clicked, then my own voice came through it, delayed by a second, saying, "Don't go in the wash." My partner froze, and I heard him swallow. He spoke into his mic anyway, and his words didn't come over the net. They came from the ravine, lower than the lantern, as if he were already down there, and I was hearing him up through the fog. He said, "I can see your light," and there were 3 replies at once, all in his tone, each a fraction too slow, like someone shadowing the melody of a song they only half remember. We backed up together the way you walk from a ledge, weight on heels, line tight between us. The lantern ahead of us dimmed, then flared, then tilted sideways in a way no hand would hold it, like it had been hung on something that suddenly leaned. I lifted my own light, and caught a line of stones that should not have been there, a knee-high wall snaking out of the slope and vanishing into Manzanita. Old road. Wrong place. The park map shows a single switchback in that area. The historian's overlay in the office shows 4, a stage route cut a century ago and abandoned after a winter slide. We were standing where a bend used to be, but the ground under the scrub never forgot. The lantern drifted along the ghost of that bend and waited by a break in the brush, patient as a hand. We did not go to it. We let it wait, and it never tired. On the drive back to the station, the radio cleared as if someone flipped a switch in the tree line. My partner didn't talk until we were parked under the sodium lamps, and then he only said, "Don't hang a story on it. Don't feed it." He pulled his jacket off and set it on the bench. It smelled like damp rope and kerosene. The next morning, the historian printed an 1899 survey and circled a place that matched ours. 3 deaths on that bend. Unrecovered. If you think the unnatural lives only in forests, try a place with glass walls and fluorescent hum where the night is supposed to be civilized. The clerk who sent me this works the graveyard at a highway station west of the state line. He is not a storyteller. He sent me the shift log, a sour coffee ring stamped in the corner, and a 30-second clip from the ceiling cam. The tape opens with an empty door, and a chime that should mean someone entered. The clerk was alone. No cars at the pumps, no trucks idling in the pull-throughs, snow shivering under the lights like a movie noise effect. He heard the chime, said welcome without looking up, and poured coffee for a man who wasn't at the counter. The pot tipped like a hand had nudged it. The lid bounced. He set the pot down slowly and looked at the door. The glass was filmed with frost from the outside, but there was no shape behind it. 2 seconds later the restroom key on the pegboard rattled. You know the kind, a big fob cut from a paint stir stick with a key taped to it, and a number nobody returns. It swung like someone had blown on it. Then the hallway motion light clicked on, a pale wash falling over the stop shoplifting sign, and he saw a wet footprint appear by the bathroom door, toes toward him, as if the foot had pressed down through the light itself and left an apology. He locked the counter door and called the non-emergency line, because you don't hit 911 for a footprint. While it rang, the pump screen outside woke and displayed lift nozzle on pump 2. Nothing stood there. He took one step back and his shoulder bumped the magazine rack. The top row slid, titles clacking. Something brushed the underside of the counter, and he heard the rubber mat breathe. He said, "Sir, the bathroom is for customers," and his own voice came back from inside the door. The trooper said he'd swing through. The clerk kept the counter between him and the hall and watched the ceiling chem feed on the cracked monitor. It showed the door glass, the pumps, the snow. It showed the restroom corridor. It did not show the man who walked out of that bathroom and said exact change on the counter in quarters so cold they smoked. He wore a denim jacket gone shiny at the elbows and a hat with a County Road crew patch. The clerk saw him. The camera didn't. The man asked if the westbound on-ramp had reopened. His breath didn't fog. His voice sounded like tires bumping a bridge seam, a thump each second. The clerk said the ramp was closed for plows. The man nodded, exact, and tipped his hat. When he turned, the back of his denim was slid high across the shoulder blades, a straight line, something dried along it in a fan. By the time the trooper rolled in, the quarters had stopped smoking but stayed so cold my fingertips went numb when I picked one up. He asked what pump the man had used, and when I said two, we both looked out at a lane of snow where no tracks crossed the light. His radio crackled with another unit checking a closure on the westbound ramp. "You hear antifreeze?" he asked. I did, a sweet heat cutting through the cold like fruit. The camera over the door showed us both standing there with empty air between, the change sitting by itself like props on a stage. On the monitor, pump 2 stayed dark. At the window, the pump screen blinked lift nozzle, and the hose gave a tired shiver as if it had been set down a second before we looked. The trooper stepped outside, hat pulled low, boots squeaking on crystals that hadn't been crushed yet. I watched him check the card reader and peer at the nozzle like he expected to see a hand wrapped around it, some mistake that would explain everything. When he came back in, he set his gloves by the quarters and said, "These are colder than the window." He pressed one against the glass, and it fogged the frost instead of clearing it, a print going the wrong direction. "Show me the restroom," he said, and I was glad not to be alone going down that hall. The motion light clicked even though we were still 2 steps away, like someone had walked out to meet us and turned around at the last second. There were no water sounds, no hand dryer, just the hum of the ballast overhead and our breath. The sink handle was wet and warm, not hot, the kind of warmth that comes from a palm pressed there too long. The mirror had a smear across it that read open in a child's careful block letters and then, a second later, faded from the edges in until it was just streaks. We both looked down at the floor. There was a single drop of water that fell and hit the tile without spreading, like it was colder than the room would allow. The trooper opened the stall anyway. It was empty, door still latched from the inside. He put his finger through the gap and lifted the latch, and when it sprang, the sound didn't echo like it should have. It sounded like fabric tearing across a shoulder blade. We stared at each other because we had both heard that before in different uniforms. He didn't say anything until the call came over his radio from a mile west. Single vehicle on the ramp, driver ejected, no pulse. He looked at the quarters again, counted them, and said that's the old toll for the bridge before they tore the booth down. He picked one up and turned it over with his thumb. The date read 1989. He said, "You called this in at 2:17, right?" I nodded. He showed me his watch. It said 2:09. Time had done a small wrong thing and then pretended not to. He wrote the incident up, took the coins in an evidence bag that fogged like a breath, and left to close the ramp while the wrecker worked. On the way out, he looked at the camera feed again and stayed with it longer than made sense, like he was waiting to see himself walk by with the man beside him. At 3:17 a.m., a plow crawlered past and the ramp reopened. The clerk said he watched the highway from the window, and in the first convoy of trucks he saw a man on the shoulder standing very straight with his arm out, hand closed around nothing. The denim at his back shone like a wet shell. He was gone by the time the last taillight sank. The trooper called 3 days later to ask if the change had turned room temperature yet. It hadn't. He said the driver on the ramp had been wearing a county patch, and the extrication had required cutting across the jacket's shoulders to get the body free of the seat. Where you hold someone isn't always where they were. That was the last of the clerk's notes. Maybe you can rationalize each of these nights if you keep them in their lanes. Hospitals make noises, old roads leave scars, snow plays tricks with light and time. That works until the pattern starts talking. In all three, something borrowed a voice we trusted, used a tool designed to help us, call button, lantern, door chime, and stepped into the gap we leave when we assume the night is empty. It is not a ghost story so much as a rule. Whatever waits between rooms pays attention to the ways we signal each other, and it will use them until you answer. Don't answer. I know that directive is useless when you are tired and alone, and the sound is threaded with your name, when the red exit pulse seems to slow to your heartbeat, and the glow in the trees looks like home. Still, let me give you directions for when you hear the next chime tonight. If it comes from the hallway, do not step into the center. Keep a wall on your shoulder so you have something to push against if the floor tilts. If it comes from your phone, do not put it to your ear. Set it flat and let it talk to the ceiling until it is only air again. If it comes from the woods, count your steps back to the last place you were sure of and do not let warm light convince you to walk old roads, because not every map is about distance. And if you start to drift and think this was just a voice telling stories, remember the part where it said your name. It will again, softly, tonight,